welcome to another edition of State Champs Extra Point. We have an extra person for Extra Point this time around. We go three wide. We're presented by Lawrence Technological University. The handsome fellow to my far left, you know that would be Bob Stambazze. And the younger version in this timeline of life that we have on this set for you is Mark Forrester. He is the sports director for Muncie Sports Station, WXFN, 1340 AM and 102.9 FM. Mark, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Greg. Good to be here.
All right, so we'll get to your game in a matter of moments.
Sure.
Bob and I, it seems like, had absolute classics on Friday night. And let's start with you because apparently defense was optional in the greater Wabash area last week.
They couldn't spell it. I think that's how you look at it. 49-48 in overtime. Northfield comes back and wins it over Manchester. Manchester's homecoming. And when you look at Northfield, they led 28-14 at halftime. Manchester come back 21 straight points, takes the lead, and the ping pong match then took off. And it literally came down to the last possession for Northfield to get it in there. And so it was exciting. They kicked the extra point in overtime because Manchester does it. And that's what cost them the ball game. So Northfield gets their first win of the season. So they move forward to this week.
And they do so in obviously exciting fashion. What say you? What games do you have on Friday night?
So it was Muncie Central and Indianapolis Tech. It actually in the first half turned out to be a more competitive game than we expected. Tech really used their high-powered offense in the second half. They had 5 scoring plays in the second half, all of which were over 35 yards or more. 2 were 60, 2 were 50, and 1 was 30. They blasted Muncie Central in the second half after it being a 14-7 game at halftime. So that's a team that has been talked about in their high-powered offense, and they certainly displayed that. They'll be a tough out, whoever they play coming down the road.
Now, much like Bob kind of rotates his coverage around various schools in and around the Wabash area, you do the same in Muncie, which means you've seen a lot of Delta and Yorktown this year, both having really good seasons.
They are, yeah. Yorktown had a really good win at homecoming last week, and of course Delta's had a great start to the season, 5-0, and in the Hoosier Heritage Conference, that's their focus right now. But as far as going down the road in their sectional, this is one of the stronger Delta teams that I've seen in my 5 years in Muncie. So.
All right, and again, for those that don't know, your background would be a Carmel grad, a University of Indianapolis grad. So I was in the Mark Forrester press box on Friday night with Carmel and Lawrence North, and I have been covering the MIC not every year, but the majority of years for, say, about the last 20. And I have never seen a night like that one in the league. 4 games in the league, 2 games go to overtime, 1 goes to double overtime. The 2 games that ended in regulation were both 4-point games, where one team won it with a score with 30 seconds left to go. In the other game, a team was driving and couldn't finish the deal in the final minute, and that's how things play out. The game that I had was Carmel and Lawrence North. LN was looking for just their second win against Carmel in the last 15 years. They scored with just over a minute left to go in the game. It was the second time all season that Carmel had allowed a touchdown in the second half. Extra point was good. We go to overtime. LN gets a field goal on their drive. Carmel has their sophomore quarterback in Zach Osborne call his own number on a read option for the first time all night and scores from 8 yards out. And Carmel 23-20 in overtime. They beat LN. And also of note, through just 3 games for Carmel, Center Grove and Warren have played 4, Carmel is now the only unbeaten team in MIC play at 3-0. You kind of cut your teeth as a broadcaster watching games in this league. Again, it is, from my vantage point, and I'll get your thoughts on it, the top of the league is not as good as it normally is. Mm-hmm. The back end of the league maybe is the best it's ever been. There's about this much difference, 1 through 8 in that league this year.
Well, when you're looking at it, I mean, Center Grove is 1-4, Greg, and it's interesting to say where they're at right now, and they may have just as good of a chance as everybody else in that league. The Ben Davis win over Warren Central, as you mentioned. Carmel is unbeaten in Indiana, so they're playing pretty darn well as well. But we came into 6A this year. Obviously, the MIC has controlled 6A for quite a long time. It's a toss-up.
Yep.
As we sit here in Week 5 going into Week 6, it's certainly a toss-up, and I think that'll make it more exciting, even though the top, as you mentioned, may not be quite as strong.
For those who don't know our friend Bob's background, in addition to being a great broadcaster and official in this state for many years, and with that we go to the west side of Indianapolis because here's how things played out. Warren Central blocked a field goal late in the game that would have sent the game to overtime. The ball on the block was live. It went backwards. There was a chase for the ball. The Warren Central sideline, not 1, 2, or 3, but numerous players are on the field celebrating, thinking the game was over. Celebration flag gets thrown. Ben Davis ends up kicking the field goal properly this time, makes it. We go to overtime, and in double overtime, Ben Davis gets the win. That's a tough call for an official to make, but frankly, I've seen the film. It was absolutely the right call the official had to make.
The one guy you're actually looking for right now, where's the get-back coach? Everybody has a get-back coach.
Well, one get-back coach wasn't getting 20 dudes. He would have been the best get-back coach in the world.
You have him talk to the kids on the side before the play saying, don't go out there until it's dead because it's live. You tell them that. You explain the rule to them so they understand. Don't get out. Oh, that's what happened.
The only bit of good news for those that think that Warren Central was done wrong by that call, which, again, after having watched it, I don't think they were. Warren will play Carmel in week number 8. And they, in theory, if they're able to win their next couple of games, they could at least share and own the tiebreaker of the league championship if they can get a victory over Carmel coming up a few weeks from now. Now, Bob, I want to go back to you because, again, 6A has been dominated by what has happened in terms of the mixed schools. It might not be the case this year. We had a big game, Snyder and Homestead. Homestead getting a 49-36 win.
A lot of points on the board, which surprised me. That many points on the board against a Snyder team and come away victorious. But the passing of Luke Good, I mean, he threw for over 366 yards in that victory over Snyder. Also, Braden Howardwick rushed for over 160 yards. Those are two numbers that just jump at me when you're playing a Fort Wayne Snyder team. You just don't see those numbers, but yet Snyder was able to put big numbers on the board themselves, but just come up a little short. This, right now, I think, is the destiny for Homestead on what they've got to do. But they still have a big game coming up with Carroll in a week, and so that, I think, will decide everything in the SAC.
The Summit is really deep this year. We could say that every year, but especially the larger enrollment schools all seem to be really solid up in the SAC this year. Quickly, Fishers falls in the ranks of the unbeatens. Brownsburg got them, and then also Westfield loses for the first time this year to Hamilton Southeastern. So the teams without a loss kind of dropped like flies over the course of the 6A weekend. Quickly in 5A, New Pal won handily. You kind of expect that at this point. Cathedral, another close loss in Cincinnati. They lose to St. X 41-37 after losing in overtime 2 weeks ago at Elder. So the Irish are 3-2, but they are 2-0 against schools from the state of Indiana so far this year. And 3 of their last 4 games will be played against schools from the state of Indiana. The other one would be Louisville Trinity, who will play their 3rd Indiana opponent when they play at Cathedral coming up in week number 7. Valparaiso as a team you should have on your radar. Remember, they were in the 6A semi-state last year. When Snyder got put back in 6A, Valparaiso got bumped down to 5A. They're a really good football team. They put it on Chesterton. Again, just kind of some of the thoughts in 5A. Another game in the Fort Wayne area I want to get your opinion on. Fort Wayne Dwenger beating 6A Carroll 10-3.
Well, I actually was at Carroll on Thursday night working a game and talking to some of the guys, and they really felt positive about this ball game. But Dwenger comes in, tremendous athletes on this football team, only giving up 3 points to Carroll, putting 10 on the board themselves. Dwenger is a beast up there right now.
And remember, Dwenger, 4A enrollment, playing up in 5A as the 4A state champs, had made the semi-state round the year before. That's what qualified them to go up to 5A. People think they can do damage in 5A. And the top end of 5A, folks, New Pal, Valpo, Cathedral, Dwenger. Man, the semi-states and regions are going to be really good in 5A by the time we get to November. Let's a couple of other matchups I want to mention. Decatur Central beats Mooresville 24-21. DC had appeared a little bit down this year, but beat the number 1 team in 4A on Friday night. And Franklin is 5-0 for the first time in Lord knows how long, as they beat Martinsville 62-39. I think it maybe has been 50 years since the Grizzly Cubs were 5-0. Congratulations to Coach Call. Let's go to 4A, where the Delta Eagles run their record to 5-0 by beating Mike Kirshner's Mount Vernon squad 27-10.
And you know what? They came into this game, they had the top, one of the top scoring averages in the entire state. Then they gave up 6 points to Yorktown, and we were joking on the broadcast that their scoring average from 2.3 went up to 4.0. So, this game started off kind of like they started off the previous 3 weeks. However, Mount Vernon came back, and you expect that to be the case. In the second half, they were able to get things rolling, but that's a really impressive win. And we were talking before that, this sets up. It's a little bit of forecasting, but Week 9 in the HHC, when New Pal comes in, Charlie Spiegel going back to Delta, that was a big statement win in the HHC because that sets up some things that could be really, really exciting in Week 9. We have a long way to go to that, but that was a big win to get to that point.
Not that anyone in Delta or the Muncie suburbs is looking past Charlie Spiegel's return back to Delta. For those who don't know the story, he played there as a freshman and sophomore, transferred to New Pal, obviously led them to a state championship, now is the state's all-time leading rusher, and we think will easily pass 10,000 yards by the time this season is done from a rushing standpoint. What does it say about those guys that even when their best player left 2 years ago, here they are 5-0, and I'm not sure if they have enough for New Pal. They'll be focused on that in week number 9. But once they get past that game, they don't have to worry about New Pal anymore. They have a chance to go deep into the 4A playoffs. Your thoughts about this Eagles ball club and kind of what they've done without their star the last couple of years?
Well, they had to replace 2 of their better defensive players that they've had in 5 years, and both were at inside linebacker. And so when you lose those 2 guys, you think the defense might take a step back. They've actually been a better defense this year. Of course, the scoring numbers that way, but the ability to rotate in on the defensive line the last 2 years, once Charlie Spiegel left, has been a balanced offensive attack. They had, I believe it was 12 different players that scored rushing touchdowns last year, so they had a lot of depth in that regard. But Brady Hunt, the junior quarterback, has really taken strides. He's getting some looks. He's being able to complement that running game. And so it's a very balanced attack, certainly very, very early, even though we're through 5 weeks. But you're exactly right. This is probably the most complete Delta team they've had in 5 years.
And again, Delta, a team that has made a state finals appearance before in football. It's been a few years, back in 2001 when they took on Jasper. A couple of scores from 3A. The Circle City Conference and Conference Indiana have a scheduling agreement where those schools play each other to help fill in some non-conference date. Scored 2 wins with the Circle City Conference. The 3A boys beating the 6A guys. It was Garin Catholic beating Columbus North and Chittard beating Southport. That score 35-9. In 2A, we talked about if there's every year where Cecina's going to beat Roncalli, it might be this year. Oh no, Rebels 34-7. It's the last time those 2 diocesan schools in Indianapolis are going to play each other. In 1A, you and I have talked about kind of South Adams and Adams Central. Monroe Central has kind of served as the litmus test. South Adams got a victory over Monroe Central, 34-15 on Friday night.
Well, they got that juggernaut going. I mean, plain and simple. Everybody's looking to this week's game, but they've had to put Monroe Central in there, and it's just a great game. I'll just say this, great setup game for both those teams coming in to face each other this week.
And that big game, 5-0 versus 5-0, takes place. And by the way, to show you how big that game is, the guys from ESPN Radio in Fort Wayne are going to go do that game. South Adams and Adams Central. That's their featured game coming up in week number 6. By the way, big game in the Hoosier Heartland Conference. We felt Clinton Prairie could put up some points against Sheridan. They did. Couldn't stop the Blackhawks. 47-39 the final score, and that's a big game in the smaller version of the HHC. We have to get to a timeout. When we come back, we'll talk about those big matchups coming up in week number 6. I can't believe we're saying it's week number 6 already.
That's crazy.
You're watching State Champs Indiana Extra Point, presented by Lawrence Technological University.
I admit it. I love working with money, negotiating, and making big decisions. That's why I'm majoring in finance and economics at Lawrence Tech. What's truly amazing about the education here is the small class sizes that give me easy access to my professors who truly care about my future. They even helped me get a great internship. And I was able to fulfill my lifelong dream of playing college golf. Lawrence Tech, where Blue Devils dare.
Welcome back. It is State Champs Indiana Extra Point, presented by Lawrence Technological University, alongside Bob Stambazze and Mark Forrester on this week's show. I'm Greg Rakestraw. Thanks to both Chris Landis and Mitch Early behind the scenes, as well as our host site, the studios of the ISC Sports Network. In 6A, one game that I want to get to, it is Avon and Fishers. Again, Rick Wimmer's ball club lost for the first time this season against Brownsburg. Avon beat that Brownsburg team 7-3 in a great rivalry game in week number 4. Again, the Avon Orioles, number 1 in 6A. It will not be easy making that crosstown trip to go play Fishers on Friday night. In 5A, the game that has my attention again, not exactly 5A versus 5A, but teams that have been recent state champions. Dwenger goes to Concordia on Friday night.
It should be a good one. Concordia comes in with a record of 3-2 in Dwenger sitting there 4-1. Concordia struggled a little, putting some points on the board. That's one thing Dwenger really steps up is with their defense. So this will be an interesting matchup of really outstanding athletes in the SAC.
Again, another cross kind of divisional cross, not conference, but cross classification matchup. Mooresville will still be ranked in the top 10. They won't be number 1 in 4A after losing to Decatur Central in mid-state conference play last week. Again, the story continues at Franklin. They are 5-0, and they have these wonderful, I call them new. They're about 11 years old at this point, but it's the world's largest one-room schoolhouse. This all-brick building on the west side of Franklin. That is Franklin Community High School. Great athletic facilities. I guarantee you that place will never have seen more people than will be there on Friday night, as generations of Grizzly Cub fans will be there to see if they can run their record to 6-0. Big game in the HHC from a 4A standpoint. Pendleton Heights and Mount Vernon. Again, these are two solid teams. A lot of the shine in that league obviously goes to New Pal, but these are both good teams.
Very good teams. And Pendleton Heights coming into this year had to replace a lot of senior leadership, and they've done that very, very well. Again, their one loss this year to New Pal, as well as Mount Vernon. So this is a really good battle in Week 6, and they could be in a position, at the end of the year to get a second place finish in the conference, with Delta's matchup in Week 9 that we continue to preview. Still a long ways out, but Pendleton Heights or Mount Vernon, this win for one of these two schools could put them in a position for that conference title in second place.
Chittard and Garin Catholic, we referenced the big wins they had last week in the last segment. They play each other. That game is at Garin. That game will be broadcast on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan in Indianapolis. Massive game in southern Indiana. Gibson Southern and Heritage Hills, these two schools in the same sectional. One of these two schools has a loss. It's Gibson Southern, but that was at Southport 2 weeks ago to 6A competition. You haven't dropped your favorite word yet in the show, Bob.
No.
This one's going to be?
A slobber knocker.
Without question. We'll feel the slobber all the way in central Indiana from down along the Ohio River in that one. Big regional rivalry game. Brownstown Central and Seymour. The Owls been off to a good start. Brownstown Central with head coach Reed May. They're great every year. It's the battle for Jackson County. That game is coming up at Seymour on Friday night. In 2A, Cecina is at Lutheran, as in last week's 2A number 1 versus pretty much number 1 in the state in 1A the entire year. Winner of that game likely wins the Indiana Crossroads Conference. There are great games every week that take place in the Hoosier Conference. Western is at Lewis Cass. Lewis Cass is 5-0 for head coach Jeff Phillips. Rensselaer Central, who suffered a loss to West Lafayette last week, goes to Central, or actually plays host to Lafayette Central Catholic. And again, CC got a good win over Tipton last week. Bob, back to you for this one. South Adams, Adams Central.
Well, you're sitting there looking. Schwaller is the quarterback from Adams Central. Outstanding athlete. Talking to a lot of coaches, that's their go-to guy down there. Yeagler is their big running back down there. Then you look over at South Adams. You got the former head coach's son as the quarterback in there in Arnold, and this kid is good, over 600 yards. But, they've got another quarterback that's throwing for almost 300 yards in there, and they've got Stuber, the running back. So one thing South Adams does, they put points on the board. One thing South Adams does, not allow you to put points on the board. So this is going to be really a slobber knocker over there in Adams County.
Remember, Adams Central was the semi-state runner-up to Pioneer, and even though Pioneer pulled away as they did, for the better part of the last 3 years in every game, no team was more competitive with Pioneer, I thought, in that great run of Jack Kaiser than Adams Central was in that semi-state game. You would expect that the Northern 1A semi-state champion likely comes out of that group of South Adams, Adams Central, and again, Monroe Central's now played them both. So This game has some serious postseason ramifications as to who the favorite might be in the North between South Adams and Adams Central. That's a quick look at what's going to take place in week number 6. Now for the latest in all things recruiting, we go to Alan True from 24/7 Sports.
This is Alan True from 24/7 Sports with this week's State Champs Recruit Report. Let's start in the 2021 class, and let's start in West Lafayette, as Purdue has offered Lawrence North junior quarterback Donovan McCulley. McCulley is a 6'5", 195-pound recruit who now has offers from Cincinnati, Indiana, Kentucky, and Purdue at the Power 5 level. An excellent athlete who can run as well as throw the ball. Look for more offers to continue his way, but Jeff Brom and his staff are the most recent. Let's go down to Carmel now, where senior running back Dylan Downing has picked up a new offer from Eastern Illinois. A physical 5'11", 205-pound back, he has offers already from Washington State, Tulane, Central Michigan, Eastern Michigan, Toledo, and now Eastern Illinois. And what good is a running back without some big guys up front? And one of Downing's top offensive linemen, Thor Cratch, has picked up a new offer as well. A senior offensive lineman for the Greyhounds, Cratch was offered by Kent State when he visited their campus for a game on Saturday. The Golden Flashes are now battling MAC-foe Central Michigan, who has also offered him a scholarship. For this week's State Champs Recruit Report, I'm Alan True.
I'm on the Blue Devil football team, and that's a great place to be, because other colleges wouldn't let me be both a football player and a nursing student. And just because I'm a dog on the field doesn't mean I can't take care of people. And man, do I love people. The small class sizes at LTU give me awesome access to my nursing professors. Lawrence Tech, where Blue Devils dare.
It is our Spotlight segment here on State Champs Indiana Extra Point, presented by Lawrence Technological University, alongside Mark Forrester from WXFN in Muncie, and then from the My Bash Sports Network and other sundry titles. It is Bob Stambazze that is joining us on the program, as he does each and every week. This show debuts Wednesdays at 5 on the various social media platforms of State Champs Indiana, and of course you can also see replays on the ISC Sports Network as well. We always pick out, say, 3 or 4 players to talk about on this show. And let's talk about a team that we've talked about in each of the last 2 segments, and that would be Franklin. The engine for them is Drew Byerly. He is a multi-sport athlete at Franklin High School. 6'3" quarterback. There's a lot of linemen that are kind of built like Drew at Franklin. He's about 6'3" and 230. He's a post player on the basketball team. He is their quarterback. He produced 8 touchdowns against Martinsville. That's a good month for most quarterbacks. That was 3 hours in a 62-39 victory. 4 rushing, 4 passing, 130 yards rushing, 232 yards passing, 543 yards rushing for the tank at QB so far in the season. 12 touchdown passes as well, as he is having a fall to remember down in Johnson County. For a second week in a row, Cameron Hovey of Sheridan reaches our spotlight. He did kicking, running, filled in for the injured Sheridan quarterback, 53 carries. I didn't think there was time in a football game to have 53 carries. 344 yards rushing, 6 touchdowns. We talked about this last week, Bob. I did not know I was going to be Nostradamus. I joked that I said he had 242, 278, 318. I said, so he's due for 340-something. You want to tell him how much he rushed for last week?
I believe it's called 344.
This is why you listen to me, Grasshopper. It's why you are here. Learn from the wisdom, or it's more the blind squirrel finding nut thing like that. All right, for the last 2 players, these are guys from your area and players that if you haven't seen them, you've talked about them a lot during the course of the season. Tell us about James Arnold at South Adams.
James Arnold, the son of Jason Arnold, the former coach and athletic director up at South Adams. 6'3". Here we go, another prototypical size quarterback at 6'3" for a 1A school. Just set the all-time record for passing yards at South Adams, over 3,300. Was 19 of 32 last weekend for 312 yards and 5 touchdowns in their big win. This kid is a horse. I think he's going to go someplace big. I really do. But what a great kid. If you've ever met him, I know you've talked about other kids down south that way. This kid is an outstanding student athlete at South Adams.
All right, early in the season, you had Alexandria, and again, they're known for their baseball these days, but they got a pretty good football player in their hands, too.
And baseball player, in Ryan Matthews.
A state champ, yep.
Yeah, he's left-handed. He throws from the left side. Big 6'1" kid, 18 of 21 last week, 262 yards, 5 touchdowns in a win over Blackford. He also ran 12 times for 106 yards. Everything that Alexandria does will go through Metz. I don't care what it is. He is the best player on the field, bar none on either side of the football. He's really an intelligent young man and has a knack for the game.
We'll let the rookie speak in the Spotlight segment next time he's on the show in the month of October. Before we get to talking about the games that we will have and the games that will be covered on State Champs Indiana for next week's show, let's tell you about the television show that you can see multiple times each week, debuting every Sunday on Fox Sports Indiana. And for that, we turn it over to Lauren Plant.
Hey, great. Thank you so much. You guys always do a great job. In fact, this week on State Champs, we're going to show the ISC Sports Network some love. We'll have coverage from some of the games that they are filming in and around Indianapolis metro area. We'll also have some games from throughout the state. Obviously, it's a huge week, but it's also huge in other sports. So we've got great highlights coming up for you. It's all on State Champs, plus an In Focus feature on Bud Wright. Can't miss that. So why don't you join us every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Central on Fox Sports Midwest, and of course State Champs re-airs throughout the week on Fox Sports Indiana. Back to you guys.
I've always been really good at math and science, and I knew I wanted to work in healthcare, but not as a doctor. So I chose Lawrence Tech's biomedical engineering program. I've pushed myself to take internships like this one at a hospital in an orthopedic research lab. Thanks to Lawrence Tech's unique, hands-on style of education, I'm graduating with a published research paper and a job. Lawrence Tech, where Blue Devils dare.
Welcome back for the final time on State Champs Indiana Extra Point, presented by Lawrence Technological University. Greg Rakestraw, Mark Forster, Bob Stambazze with you for a final time. One more time, thank you, Chris Landis and Mitch Early behind the scenes. The final segment of the show reserved for where we are going to be on Friday night. And let's see, Bob just had 49-48. I just had an overtime game, so we kind of tend to think we know what we're doing as far as setting up our schedules. Bob, where are you going to be?
Well, My Bash Sports Network and 105.9 The Bash will be at Southwood homecoming night as the Manchester Squires travel south in a big TRC tussle. Manchester 1 win, Southwood undefeated, ranked number 4 in 1A. This is going to be an interesting ball game, and you've heard us say it all the time, right? Throw the records out. This is going to be a slobber knocker in Wabash County.
And frankly, Bob, I mentioned South Adams, Adams Central, and Monroe Central. Yeah. Southwood deserves to be in that conversation, too. They're going to have a say as to who comes out of the North in 1A as well.
They definitely are. They're quite a team. They lost all their big hogs up front from last year, but they have filled them admirably this year.
And I know the numbers their offense put up 2 years ago with all those guys that graduated and then made the basketball state finals about 4 or 5 months later. The fact that, a lot of times as a small high school, when you cycle through that talent, it takes you a couple of 3 years to be good again, usually meaning more than 2 years, and because of credit to them.
And the Blair kid came back to be the quarterback's coach and helps with the offense. So they're kind of hitting on all cylinders with the coaching staff now.
I still think I'd have him shave his beard and change his name, just in case he needs to go back out there.
Needs a haircut.
Find some extra eligibility. I'm just kidding about that, folks.
It's been tried.
Maybe not really. All right, so, Mark, who do you have on Friday night?
So we have Delta and Newcastle on homecoming for Delta. They try to go to 6-0, and again, Newcastle fell to Yorktown, which Delta beat by 30 points plus 2 weeks ago. So Delta looks to have a celebratory night, trying to get everything balanced and keep that defensive scoring average to keep dropping because they've had it rise by a point or two lately. It's right around 4.5 points right now.
All right, so I jokingly refer to the press box at Carmel High School as the Mark Forster press box. If I go back there anymore, this year will be the Greg Rakestraw press box because that's where I'm going. Carmel on Friday night is where I will be for Carmel and North Central. When these two teams played last year, it took 3 overtimes to decide it before Carmel won that game 42-41. North Central, a 24-20 win at Center Grove on Friday night. North Central took them a while to find their offense. They found it now. They have a senior quarterback, Harry Abel, but at the same time, he was the backup to Liam Thompson last year and never attempted a single pass. Well, Liam, as a freshman, is now the starter at Wabash College to show you how good he is. Harry's kind of found something these last couple of weeks. It's a North Central team that suffered some key losses from an injury standpoint on defense, but Kevin O'Shea's team is finding a way to get the job done. And as mentioned earlier in the show, there's only one unbeaten team left in league play in the MIC, and that would be Carmel. Carmel North Central, you can see that on the ISC Sports Network, on My Indy TV 23, as well as Comcast 81 on a statewide basis with coverage beginning at 7 o'clock. Key games for state champs Indiana, and Chris did a great job in picking these. Likely the game that will decide the Indiana Crossroads Conference, Cecina, who suffered their first loss of the season in a non-conference game at Roncalli on Friday night, taking on Lutheran, who comes in at 4-0. Mooresville and Franklin, and this game will go a long way to determine who the mid-state champion is going to be. Look for extended coverage of those two games on this week's television show for State Champs Indiana. Mark, an absolute pleasure. Looking forward to having you in here a couple of times during the course of the year.
Really appreciate it, Greg. Thank you.
And Bob, you're the best. You knew that already.
I say that every day in the mirror.
And appreciate your hydration concerns for me over the weekend. For Bob and Mark, this is Greg Rakestraw. You've been watching State Champs Extra Point, State Champs Indiana Extra Point, again presented by Lawrence Technological University.